Hey guys, I hope everyone is safe. We're gonna take a break from Argonians today. Don't worry, we're definitely gonna talk about them another time. But today, I wanted to look at Bravil. Bravil?
In Bravil.
After seeing Beyond Skyrim's Bravil showcase, I got to thinking. This is a city with plenty of merchants and located on a river with tons of traffic to and from the Imperial City. So why is Bravil poor? Well, I looked into this, and a lot of you probably know that Bravil has issues. But did you ever notice that despite all the crime, Bravil's jails are empty? Did you know that Bravil has the lowest native Imperial population? And did you know that Bravil left the Empire after the Oblivion Crisis? And that there's dialogue in Oblivion that foreshadows this? I'm going to be looking at Bravil today, mostly as seen in Oblivion, as that's where most of our hard data comes from. Our other main sources for Bravil come in the form of a group of missions in Elder Scrolls Legends, minor mentions in the Elder Scrolls Online, and Gregory Keyes' novel, The Infernal City. But these sources have Bravil in an even worse state than the Elder Scrolls Oblivion. So it's safe to say the slums here haven't changed much, if not for the worse. So I'm going to use Oblivion's Bravil to talk about its economic prosperity in comparison with other cities today. With that in mind, because 5 is a number that people like, let's talk about the top 5 reasons Bravil is poor. Number 5, labor participation. Out of the 59 citizens seen in Oblivion's Bravil, at least 9 of them have either no job implied in dialogue or on their daily schedule. That's 15.3%. If the games are just representing a realistic fantasy world, that means Bravil, with a population of, say, 100,000, would have a whopping 15,254 who are jobless. I've compared this with other cities using the same criteria, and Bravil's takes the cake. But what is everybody really doing exactly? I made this list with pictures, just so that we can get a little better idea of what the workforce looks like. Now, you're going to notice an unemployment rate that I've calculated. This is mostly for the memes, and not based on actual Bureau of Labor definition of unemployment, which is you must be both out of a job and looking for a job. This is impossible to determine in Oblivion, as you can imagine. So I just kind of looked at every NPC to see if they should count towards this not working number. If you're curious about a specific choice I made, please leave a comment below. I will answer. I don't have time in this video to go over the whole thing, but I do want to talk about a few of them so you can get a sense of how I've judged Bravil in comparison with other counties. So, firstly, I didn't count those confirmed retired. Androgil is kind of a master trainer anyway, and I didn't include the Count's son. I don't know, he just kind of seemed like a trust fund baby to me. Alaron, the gambler in that island fort with the orc quest, actually does have a job implied by his wife.
He'd visit the arena every week and spend our hard-earned money on bets.
We just don't know what it is, so I just put him as laborer. Ursan is therefore employed by marriage. Roxanne Bridget is a skooma junkie plus. She helps out the boys and carries the most amount of skooma. Whatever that means. I consider her unemployed, but if you think she deserves a spot, even on the dark web, just subtract another 2% from my number. So, skooma junkies and certain bums are on my list. That makes the 7. I'm really on the fence about Renam and Brokill. Both stay at Silverhome on the water, and they're basically residents. Brokill's there to be Bravil's master of taps, while Renam's there to just stare at the canal all day and be in a loading screen. They don't really have jobs, but it's one of those things where you might give them the benefit of the doubt, based on the money Brokill spends on beer, for example. I don't know. I personally say no. They're unemployed. But it was on the fence enough for me to include 2 numbers here. So this is my list. This is kind of the unemployment zone, and yeah, City Swimmer's down there. Yeah, she's got a home. Yeah, she's a trainer, but just a basic one? In Sneak? She doesn't do anything. She steals a lot, but isn't a Thieves Guild member. Eventually, she will die by the guards because she gets caught. So yeah, definite bump. I didn't include definite visitors like Blackwood member G-Ta. I also didn't include Dark Brotherhood members who spawn just for the statue quests. I also didn't include anybody who can't be considered a resident at game start. Okay, so what's the point? Well, I took a lot of these same methods for judging NPCs and applied them to other cities for comparison. I'm just going to give you the numbers for these ones, but again, if you want to know why I made a choice, just leave a comment below. Some I felt were up in the air and I've given alternate numbers accordingly. The big takeaway here is even with generous benefits of the doubt, Bravil's unemployment numbers outperform all the other cities. So you might be wondering now, well, what about the shops? Unfortunately, shop owner gold doesn't tell us much. It's pretty average for the rest of Cyrodiil. This is because, for the most part, merchant gold is tied to an NPC's mercantile skill with a few exceptions. I tried a few number crunches to compare Bravil's shops with the towns, but nothing was really sticking out. Also, the thing is, a city can have plenty of shops and business owners who seem to be doing okay, but that doesn't tell us things are necessarily competitive or not. They're also making money off tenants, it seems, so that's good for them, right? Anyway, according to this system, Unemployment is at its highest in Bravo, more than anywhere else in Cyrodiil. Thing is, shops show a generally average trend, and what if the skooma market is actually helping the economy? So something to consider regardless of business success is that a poor distribution of resources and a corrupt government can kind of make this all go haywire. For that, let's go to number 4, leadership. And in this case, it's true. Poor distribution of resources can lead to heavy slum growth. Lazy leadership can sink a kingdom. Not just that, but what's allowed in a kingdom can have crazy effects. Why slums exist is a huge topic, but one of the major things is that a result of what's called the informal economy. It's that part of the economy that's not licensed and not monitored by the government, and usually by not paying taxes. When the informal economy is growing faster than the formal economy, slums are more likely to continue. The formal economy thus gets more competitive, and more unskilled and uneducated people in the workforce turn to under-the-radar jobs, or just do nothing and remain unemployed. And generally, according to the United Nations, it's a result of corrupt and abusive government bureaucracies which allow this to happen. If you made it to Bravo in Oblivion, it's no secret that the Count's a total sleazeball.
No point, really.
He kinda has a heart for random things, but you can tell he just doesn't care. I mean, look at all the crime running rampant in Bravo. Incarcerating all these people would be expensive, and noting Bravo's pretty empty jail cells, this might tell us that he's desperate enough to either save some money on the justice system, or just simply be apathetic to crime. Nothing explicitly proven there, but either would be very believable. Apparently, the Count used to be a cool guy, but more NPCs in the loading screen comment on him more negatively than any other Count.
The Count is too preoccupied with his pastimes to spend time on county affairs, so the burden lies on me.
Yeah, I mean, if he's an irresponsible Count, it can absolutely show how he overlooks things, intentionally or not. Drona Ray is not the only one who talks about him either. The upper class hates him.
With Regulus Terentius for a father, what do you expect from Gellius? The acorn never falls too far from the tree.
His own son, the heir to his seat, is a drug addict, and he doesn't care. What else can support evidence of Bravo's poor leadership, if not any of these things? It also means that someone high up in the court is supporting the drug trade of Bravo, undeniably making the situation here worse. Again, with a corrupt government bureaucracy being in on it, plenty of drug deals happening, and people slowly turning to shady work, the informal economy promotes slum growth and thereby shrinks the formal economy. Plus, there's all that skooma. Let's go to number 3, drugs. Have you been to the skooma den in Bravo? It's the only drug den in all of Oblivion's cities. It tells us, the player, that this place has a considerably high drug market and it's allowed to exist within the city walls. Normally this should not be a thing. Just look at the Skooma Den raid quest outside of Leyawiin. Even vendors come out to the alleys at night to sell their product, and so many NPCs are just shady. So what's the problem? Does drug trade really make a city poorer? Not precisely. It's complicated. It definitely doesn't make it richer. Harking back to the informal economy, it's really important to note here that none of these drugs would be taxed, as far as we know. So the government sees none of that money, unless they were corrupt. The relationship of drugs on an economy is a little more complicated. It can definitely cost the government big time just to deal with it. For example, the White House Archives reports a $193 billion economic cost of drug abuse in 2007 alone. You know, a handful of these figures have to do with the justice system and incarceration, so Count Terentius simply ignoring problems? Is he just trying to save money here? But in essence, drugs are generally a result, not the cause of a poor economy. The rich can afford drugs all the same, and it can even lead them to poverty. But it's those unemployed, those without work, those who are bored, who are most likely to succumb to drug abuse. Those without financial resources or those who live in poorer neighborhoods can't break their addictions as easily. What's more, the poor or unemployed are even more likely to turn to drug dealing or trafficking for money, thus inflating that informal economy even more. This also makes the city an easy target for suppliers, thus the effects snowball. Poverty may not always be the cause of drug addiction, but the two are undoubtedly related. Skooma is the drinkable hallucinatory narcotic, which comes from refined moon sugar, which comes from elsewhere, land of the Khajiit. Thanks to moon sugar having dangerous effects on everyone except Khajiit, it's a controversial drug throughout Tamriel, but the skooma itself is extremely potent and extremely addictive for everyone. Sheogorath in Khajiiti culture is considered the skooma cat. for what is crazier than a cat on skooma. In the skooma den, Roxanne is the only one with 10 responsibility, and she carries 15 skooma, by far the most of any of them. What does that mean? Is she the landlady? Hostess of a party? Either way, the guards turn a blind eye. It's totally an example of residents enabling and engaging the drug trade. But there's something else interesting here if we hop outside. If you're lucky, you might overhear the following conversation.
It should be burned to the ground. All those skooma-muddled Khajiit laying around all day. It's disgraceful.
Some citizens are blaming Khajiit specifically for the skooma problem, even though there's only 2 in there. This is another sign of power inequality. Residents scapegoating minorities for the problems of the city, so even less gets done about the real problems in leadership, and less attention is given to the very real problem of the skooma drug trade. Are Khajiit given special contempt in this city? Unfortunately, the facts show that 1/3 of the Khajiit in the city are these skooma junkies. The other 1/3 are Thieves Guild members, leaving only 1/3 of the Khajiit population as honest workers. To be fair, minorities are generally at more risk of these things in the real world, and Argonians have the same figures. On that note, Bravil has the 2nd highest Khajiit population in Cyrodiil, and the lowest native imperial population. But also, unfortunately for Khajiit, skooma is refined from moon sugar, which comes from elsewhere, right on the border there, so skooma is therefore an elsewhere problem for the Imperials. Simple as that. With Bravil so close to elsewhere's border, it's no wonder we can witness this level of prejudice for the Khajiit. This prejudice is especially evident in Skyrim, with the Khajiiti caravans forbidden from entering cities in-game. And then, in Elder Scrolls Legends, it's that there are Khajiit skooma gangs closer to the events of Skyrim, one of them being the Claws, which have control of at least 1 skooma den. Is this a result of centuries of prejudices, or was this just bound to happen for other reasons?
The Renridra Kryn are Khajiit bandits and smugglers, posing as guerrillas and freedom fighters.
I could go on about class struggles, race, and poverty. I don't really want to be out here making a video too polarizing. The point I want to make is based on this dialogue, the few racists of Bravil, regardless of their political views, would probably blame Khajiit as a whole for the problems of the city, namely the drug problem. And if you need any more proof of racial tension in Oblivion, look no further than Gelida in Leyawiin.
I know the Khajiit are all upset that the council took away their land and gave it to us. But they just have to get over it. It's our land now.
Hilariously, the Khajiit of Elsewhere do have somewhat of a claim to Bravil in some respect. I want to explain this in number 2. Bravil is a war-torn city. In Elder Scrolls Legends, we can experience Bravil in the Dark Brotherhood missions. In the 3rd chapter, Bravil is a city in turmoil. In this war, which takes place closer to the events of Skyrim, it's internal. Skooma gangs are vying for control of the city, and when you're sent to assassinate the leaders, things get even worse. The government has zero grip on the city, and you're sent to assassinate the Bravil treasurer. Elder Scrolls Online also features Bravil in Aldmeri Dominion territory, but it's inaccessible. You can, however, glitch into it and walk around all the placeholder buildings. I'm going to show a fellow YouTuber who did such a thing called Wooler. A lot of ruined buildings thanks to the Interregnum War, and what I think is coolest is how it shows Bravil on a more realistic city-size scale, complete with bridges which take you to different parts of the city. Yeah, you know, I've got mixed feelings of ESO myself, but one thing I really love is how they make things feel so much bigger. I definitely prefer ESO's Windhelm to Skyrim's, for example. Bravil has a really long history with war, actually. There's the in-game book in Oblivion, Daughter of the Niben, which explains a bit of the Alessian War of the First Era. One of the main Ayleid armies were defeated after Teo Bravilius discovered their use of alteration magic. We already talked about ESO's Interregnum War in the Second Era, where it was a part of the Aldmeri Dominion. But did you know that after the Oblivion Crisis, Bravil rebelled against the Empire in the early Fourth Era? I mean, of course, right? It's a city of unrest, ripe with internal tensions, seizing an opportunity. And there are clues in Oblivion that this was bound to be a thing. Count Terentius mentions a huge distaste of Elder Council High Chancellor Okado.
He thinks to use his position as head of the Elder Council to make himself emperor. He will not succeed.
He will not succeed. That is some foreshadowing of things to come right there. At the cost of his own people, he would do something like that. And speaking of internal tensions, Leyawiin did the same thing. Both of those now city-states were described as being at odds with each other in the Infernal City novel. That is until Emperor Titus Mede came along, which would have been sometime after 4E17. And as we mentioned before, skooma trafficker gangs got so bad in the year 4E188 that straight-up internal war broke out. This is talked about a little in Cicero's journal. journal in Skyrim actually, but you can get to play these events in Chapter 3 of the Dark Brotherhood story in Legends. Surely all this wartime is not good for business. Not mentioned, but good to note that anytime Cyrodiil and Elsewhere went to war in the past, Bravil and Leyawiin would most certainly have been the brunt of battle. I would argue though that Leyawiin is in a much more preferable economic situation. I mean, it's not great, and racial tensions are even more evident there, but it's at a strategic point between Black Marsh and Elsewhere, and on the mouth of the Niben River. What this can tell us about Bravil takes us to number 1, location. Look, wars aside, with all the crap Bravil has to deal with, why wouldn't the Empire just step in and help the city? If Bravil was strategically and economically important, wouldn't the Empire care enough to do something about it? If Bravil was making bank and was a killer seaport, surely the Emperor would make sure that a responsible noble was in charge, right? Or just do the Empire a solid by stepping in and eradicating the drug trade themselves. This isn't exactly how emperors and relationships with their lords work, but I think it's good to think about, because you would think that a port city closest to the most traded to city in Tamriel wouldn't be the poorest in its region. Well, think about this for a second. Let's take a couple scenarios. The first one will be a Dark Elf trading ship departing from Tyr, planning on taking his crew and cargo to the Imperial City for the best exchange. We don't know too much about Argonian trade bans right now against Morrowind, but let's assume the crew tries to avoid Blackmarsh entirely. By now, they might want to stop and either resupply or buy more trade goods in Seneschal, or ignore the nightmare of Khajiit customs entirely and just go to Leyawiin. They restock there, and since it's an Imperial territory, he might save a few days by trading his goods here, sacrificing an opportunity cost and just going back home early. But he thinks through this compromise and decides to press on, deciding it wouldn't be worth it, since it's the Imperial City and all. If you were this merchant, would you have thought at any point to go to Bravil? If so, why? Let's do another, this time a little shorter. You're a Seneschal Khajiit merchant. You do the short trips to Leyawiin, you sell your goods, you buy some, you come back, you join a trade guild in ESO, you rinse, you repeat, you sell your soul and pay your monthly dues. Let's say your wife just left you and took the kids. Well, now you got a little more time on your hands this month, right? So if you're going to use that time to make a little extra profit when you're already experienced with Imperial customs, where are you going to go? Bravil, or just take it to the Imperial City? Okay, so Bravil's in third place then out of these port cities. Well, no, actually. We have Anvil, serving the entire west coast for Imperial trade. And if you've watched my video on ocean currents, you'll know that this is a pretty incredible spot for a port city. This gives the Empire even less reason to care about Bravil. Why pour money into Bravil at all if you've already got these 3 cities serving the Empire? Here's one more thing to think about. What about when Bravil declared independence? Infernal City had an answer to this, and the Nibonese village of Water's Edge grew, specifically mentioning merchants and traders happily leaving the crime-ridden city of Bravil behind. And remember, Leyawiin was independent during this time too, so it's not far off that Water's Edge would have enjoyed a slight bit more success than Bravil during the early 4th era. But this is all my 2 cents. Bravil is poor because of these reasons. If there's more you can think of or I missed an important detail, please leave a comment below. I love hearing from you. Clicking like helps this channel a lot. Subscribe to get notified for more leftover lore. Stay curious, and see you next time.
There is much to learn.
That skooma trade is bad business.
Var.